The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We'll begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today, we will protect our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. She raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but Donald Trump, who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace,
if their president
Donald Trump
lives
tweeted,
all 4 years,
because that's the
they're not
standard
really
diplomacy of
anything.
Donald Trump.
No.
And when
But
Iranian
they are vice
did
presidential debates
near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as
You're going to hear
headache.
more policy tonight.
Look,
than you
our
heard the
allies
other night.
understand.
What up, Dragon Lady?
Donald Trump is fickle.
More
He will
policy
go to
tonight than
whoever has the
Kamala
most
has ever
flattery
spoken
or
in
where
her
it makes
whole
sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine.
Nope.
Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets,
the thing, though.
but effective smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years of Donald Trump's president.
Tonight than you
Gentlemen,
heard
we have
the
a lot
entire
to
night.
get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water.
Yeah,
We
with
want
this
the
new
environment
tax-
to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've
This new app-
noticed some of our
I don't
Democratic
see a
friends
clear
talking a
number
lot
of how many
about
people are in.
is a concern about carbon emissions, this
Not
idea
Tony.
that carbon emissions
Thousands.
drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have
Welcome in,
Kamala
whoever's
Harris's
in over
policies
on
actually
Rumble.
led to? More
Yeah, how
energy
are
production in China,
Rumbolians
more
doing?
manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors.
How
I
long do you think
serve
until he
as
attacks his military record?
co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together to so all of the governors and the emergency
hear me?
responders are on the ground.
Yeah.
Those happen on
How
the
long do
front
you think
end.
until he
The
attacks
federal
his
government
military
comes
record?
in, makes
Well,
sure
here's
they're
what I'm
there
saying.
so
They're
that we
super
recover. But
civilized
we're
right
still
now,
in
so
that
that
phase
might
where we
not
need to
happen.
make sure that they're staying there, staying focused.
Here's
Now,
what it is.
look, coming
If
back
I
to the
was
climate
JD
change
Vance,
issue,
I
there's no doubt this thing
absolutely would.
roared onto the scene
I
faster
had
and
a
stronger than
conversation with some
anything we've
liberals
seen.
the other day.
Senator
and
Vance
they
has said that there's a
claim
climate
their
problem in the
false,
past. Donald
their
Trump called it a
misinformation
hoax
machine
and then joked
claims
that
that
these
JD
things would
Vance
make
was only
more
in the Marines
beachfront
for
property
6
to be
months.
able to invest in.
And there is
What we've seen
no
out of the
way
Harris
that anyone, I already looked it
administration
up.
now, the
It's
Biden-Harris
absolutely not
administration,
true.
is we've
He
seen
was
this
in a
investment.
combat zone
We've
for
seen
6
massive
months.
investments,
He
the
served his
biggest
entire
in
4 years.
global
He did his
history that
thing.
we've seen in the
He was only
Inflation
in a
Reduction
danger
Act
zone for
has
6
created
months.
jobs all
People
across the
think that,
country.
like,
2000 in
they're like,
Jeffersonville,
so-and-so's been in the
Ohio,
Tim
taking
Walz
the
been in
EV
the military
technology that
for
we
20
invented
years.
and making it here.
Yeah, behind a desk.
200,000 jobs across the country. The
know what I
largest
mean?
solar manufacturing plant in
Let's
North
get
America
real.
sets in
JD's
Minnesota.
a Marine.
But my farmers know climate change is real.
Man,
They've
he's
seen
jogging.
500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have.
Soybean
We're also
sounds like a
producing
beta
more
to
clean
me.
energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's
It won't let
exactly
me
what this
show
administration has
their
done.
things.
We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future,
show it?
not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we
So what?
start thinking about how do we mitigate
Dragon
these
Lady's
disasters.
comment down there. If you
Thank
could
you,
click on
Senator.
it.
I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats,
I
and
don't know.
in particular
That's
Kamala
weird.
Harris and her leadership, if they really believe
When I
that
hover
climate
over it, it
change is
just show
serious,
and has an
what they
eyeball.
would be
But
doing
every
is
time I
more
click on it, nothing
manufacturing and more energy production
you know what?
in
I
the
can't
United
see the
States of
live
America,
chat.
and that's not what
I
they're
think people
doing.
are not
So
logged in.
clearly, Kamala Harris herself
Oh, you're not
doesn't
in the
believe
chat?
her
You
own
can't see the
rhetoric
chat?
on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's
Okay,
a
Steve
slogan
has
that
left the
often
building.
the Democrats will use here. I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one,
All right,
you're
let
going
me
to
see
make
if
the
I can see the
economy
chat
dirtier.
now.
We should be making more of those solar
Oh,
panels here in
I
the
can
United
find
States of
Minnesota.
America. Some of them
You
are,
signed
Tim,
in?
but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels.
Sorry, guys,
So if
we're
you
using
really
one
want to
stream
make
right now,
the environment cleaner,
which is
you've
an
got to
all-new
invest
app
in
for
more
us,
energy
and so
production.
we're trying to
We haven't
figure-
built a
figure
nuclear
out.
facility, I think, one in the past
You hear
40
me?
years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has
I
done the
can't hear
opposite.
anything.
That's raised energy prices.
Wait,
and
you can't
also
hear
meant
anything?
that we're doing
Senator,
more
your
spending.
time is
I
up.
know what it is.
Governor,
I'll be right
would
back.
you like to
Good
respond?
God.
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot
Guys,
be
I
topsoil
apologize
from
if we can't
erosion
get the
from these
comments
massive
up there.
storms. We saw it in
Dragon Lady
Minnesota this
says,
summer.
Y'all, I'm sorry,
And
but I
thinking
cannot
about
stay. I
how
just
do
had
we
to put my
respond to
fur
that,
baby.
we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able
put
to
my
do
fur
in Minnesota,
baby
we're starting to weatherproof some of these
down.
things. The
I
infrastructure
had him
law
for
that was
12
passed
years and my heart
allows
was
us to
hurting.
think about
Y'all take
mitigation in the
care.
future.
I'm sorry,
How do we
Dragon
make
Lady.
sure that
God
we're
bless
protecting by
you.
burying our power
Remember,
lines?
your
How do
fur
we make
baby
sure
loved you
that
back.
we're protecting lakefronts and
And
things that
I
we're
honestly
seeing
believe
more
your
and more
fur
of?
baby will
But
be
to
there in
call it a
heaven with you,
hoax
waiting
and
for
to
you.
take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora.
I
We're going to turn
understand. I
now
understand,
to
Dragon Lady.
immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border
You get home
consistently
safe.
ranks as one of the
Go
top
rest up.
issue for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you asked about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl.
Yo,
this
it is
a crisis.
crazy how she basically told him what he's about to say.
The last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths
Mr.
in our
Vice President,
nation's history.
Are you sure you don't want to say this, that, and the other thing and attack this
one point? But let's go back
point?
to this on immigration.
Like,
Kamala Harris
now
is
that
the
you
Attorney
mention it,
General
I do.
of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no. told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this.
Yes.
Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it.
I don't know. These guys are low energy.
2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling him what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up.
Now
Senator,
it's getting
the
frisky.
question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president
Senator,
again.
Your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary. But the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this.
To everyone
that vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and funding.
Aiding and abetting.
So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our border czar, Kamala Harris, has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. Right? It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status,
so if you're
temporary protected
better example is if you're hanging out with Suge Knight.
Thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important.
You don't look like just
the economy.
Margaret, the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
I love that he's like,
since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
We want to have
app has not been on the books.
Shut up, women. Men are talking.
Yeah, men are talking.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and renewable tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that.
Buying houses for illegal immigrants. Well, there's Americans like me and you.
They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% of the houses in Minneapolis prices went down on rent 4%.
And I've been illegal
and
since I
then
was
making
little.
sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit. We have one in Minnesota.
He's saying that he's saying ownership of a house is
childhood
what
poverty
creates
by
your
a third.
identity.
We
It's
save
an
money in the
important
long
part of
run, and we do the right thing for families.
What about all the
and then
working
getting
class who can't
businesses off the
afford
ground.
that?
The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax.
The economy
on everything
was
we
good
bring
under
in.
Trump.
Everyone
Straight
agrees,
up.
including businesses,
Straight
it
the
would
fuck
be destabilizing it. It would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to have, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years?
How is it fair that I pay my taxes and the illegal immigrants you want to give shit to have never paid a dime?
Bragged about that.
And they're not
We're just
even
asking
citizens.
for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look.
Meanwhile, they're giving houses to immigrants.
I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas.
This is going to be a wildly unpopular thing to say, but I feel as if though these two should be on a ticket together.
Oh, together?
Yeah.
As in one team?
One team. I'd vote for that ticket.
I would. I absolutely would.
Fair play, fair balance.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
Hold on. Since he says common sense and wisdom don't fit in the same sentence as Donald Trump, let's be real. Oof, since he's coming for the Trumpster's head.
He's coming for the Trumpster. Common sense and wisdom. No, I actually think he's a lot wiser than he lets on. Here's what it is. He's like the wise hillbilly. You know, when you meet like a hillbilly and they're saying all sorts of crazy shit and they're drinking out of a jug.
Right.
And you know what I mean? And you're like, this guy doesn't even know what shoes are. What's wrong with this dude? And later on, you realize they're fucking smart as hell. That's Donald Trump.
You know what's crazy though?
Bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record.
Juxtapose. Neither candidate, in my opinion, comes off as wise if we hold them both to the same criteria. What people are hoping for is that they'll meet enough of competency for their own agenda to be met. Let's be real, man. Kamala Harris has not said anything that I was like, well, egads. That's profoundly deep.
No, as a matter of fact, she just says, I'd say she says the opposite of wisdom. She says stupid ass shit, like on a routine basis.
Since he says that one piece of something deep that comes out of the moonshine. Moonshine makes you smart.
Yeah, exactly. Once in a while. But like, here's what I'm saying. The thing that we have to freaking always remember, I need to remind everybody of this. Trump, the reason why I have to say that anyone who says Trump is stupid or doesn't know what he's doing or whatever, his record speaks otherwise. He has dodged every attack people have made on him. He has outsmarted people left and right. He outsmarted the greatest like fucking evil corrupt system ever, the Hillary Clinton campaign. This guy, he's a bullet dodger. People are coming at him with court documents left and right, and he's just like, he's pulling some Matrix shit. Yo, that is what I love is that he acts like such a knucklehead that he makes people underestimate him, and they're like, he's such a moron. No, he's a fucking genius. That's why he's both a billionaire and a president.
Since he says, nah, for real, can we actually vote for these two instead? Roll that bean footage.
250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making
what up, DT Dubs? How the fuck are you, brother?
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska. town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher.
Oh, I'm sorry to
My
hear
first
that,
year
bro,
out, I got
man.
the
I'm
opportunity
praying for you
in
and
the
your
summer of
family.
'89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home
Oh,
and then
Tubbs,
start a
I'm sorry,
program
brother.
to take young
That's
people
horrible.
there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China.
Yo,
The issue
I
for that
love
was
since
to
he's
try and
comment. He
learn.
says, if
Now,
this
look,
bitch
my
says we got a
community
lot
knows
to
who I
cover,
am.
one more
They
time.
saw where I was
I
at.
agree.
They,
She
look,
needs
I
to
will be
stop
the
going.
first to tell
That's her
you, I have
go-to,
poured
right?
my heart into my
To shut people
community.
up.
I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends
Wait,
up losing.
Walz has
So this
visited
is about
China
trying
a
to
ridiculous amount of
understand the
times.
world. It's about trying to
Like
do the
30
best you
plus or
can for
something.
your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and
You're
letting
going to
your
the
folks
source.
understand what it is. My
Is that
commitment,
shady?
whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I
Brother
think are the
says Rumble
values that
needs
people
more
care
color.
about.
You guys should stick around.
Governor,
Affirmative
just to
action,
follow
they
up
got to
on
kick
that,
in.
the question was, can you explain the
No, just-
discrepancy?
Rumble does
All I
need
said
more
on this was I got there that summer and missed
color, and I'm all for it. I really wish we could just
that's
give
what I've
up on
said.
YouTube. I'm sick of these mainstream
So I was in
apps.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor.
Okay.
Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and
Shut
not
your
just
face,
the
bitch.
advice
That's why.
he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American
Eddie,
people.
what up, brother?
Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they
Yeah, I
govern the
think that's
country. They were
what she
so
implied,
obsessed with
too.
impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular.
Eddie says, let's just
Margaret,
listening to these
because,
two
you know,
geniuses.
Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, And you're not, probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Yeah.
Senator, your
Hell
time
yeah.
is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now
Got a
the
lot
issue
to
of
get to.
reproductive rights. Senator Rose, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing.
Oh,
A
brother.
young bride in
Fucking
Texas waiting for
tears.
their child
The
at 18
propaganda.
weeks. She has a complication.
You can
a
always
tear in the
find
membrane. She
one
needs to
horror
go in.
story or
the
more
medical care
of
at that
something
point
gone
needs to be
wrong
decided
about
by
a
the doctor.
policy you don't like.
And that would have been an abortion.
Right?
But in Texas,
Right.
that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having
And you're
children.
right. Everyone is this
Or
Amanda
in
chick.
Kentucky,
Everyone's going to get
Hadley
sepsis
Duvall,
because of
a 12-year-old
fucking,
child
if we
raped and
ban
impregnated
abortion.
by her stepfather.
Shut the fuck up, old
Those
man.
are horrific.
Make
Now,
me my
when
call.
got asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their project
Because you're going to be talking about it
2025 is going to
nonstop.
have a
Because they're
register
only
of
2
pregnancies.
examples of something
It's going to
going
make
wrong.
it more difficult, if not impossible,
I heard once upon a
to
time
get
someone failed
contraception
open heart surgery.
and limit access, if
What
not
happened?
eliminate.
I heard once upon a
access to
time someone
infertility
failed
treatments.
open heart surgery.
For so many of you
Probably
out there
too.
listening, me included, infertility treatments
Right,
are why I have
exactly.
a child.
Therefore, we should
That's
ban it.
nobody else's business. But those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is
That is
basic
how
human
this
right.
works. That
We
is
have
absolutely
seen
what state laws.
maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions.
That's
Let
not murder,
the
man.
individual states make their abortion
In fact-
policy. And
Hey,
I think that's
who
what
said
makes
that?
the most
Where are you
sense
reading
in a
this?
very
Since
big,
you
a
said
very
that.
diverse, and
In
let's
fact,
be honest,
I would
sometimes
say your
a
understanding
very,
of the
very
Old
messy
Testament is
and
flawed,
divided country.
there'd be
Governor,
some
would you like to
flaws
respond
in,
and
the
also
New
answer the
Testament
question
as well.
about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because
You
of that,
see,
she
all
had
they
to
have are
travel a
propagandic
long
stories.
distance
All they have is like
to North
they
Carolina
find the worst
to
case
try and get her
scenario
care.
that will give you a nightmare.
Amber Thurman
and
died
they'll tell it to you.
in that
But it has
journey
nothing to do with
back and forth.
averages or the
The
actual.
fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation
Here's what it is. You
say
in
that your
order
life
for I'm going to lower
and
this
your
idiot,
rights,
because
as
fuck him.
basic as the right
But
to control your
basically,
own
like the whole
body
thing is like,
is determined
in
on
order for a
geography.
story, like
There's
an
a
actual
very
like
real
story to not be
chance
propaganda
that
and
Thurman
not be just
lived in
something there in the
Minnesota,
it
she
has
would
to
be
have like a
alive
large
today.
number. Like here's what I'm
That's
saying.
why the
If
restoration
you say
of
this
Roe versus
one
Wade.
girl,
When
this
you
one
listen to
time,
Vice President
this
Harris
girl
talk about
got
this subject, and you hear me talk
because she
about
was
it,
forced to have a
you hear us
baby, and
talking
her and the
exactly
baby
the
both
same.
died.
Donald Trump
Right?
is trying to figure
That's
out
one
how
case.
to get the
And so
political right of
he's
this.
naming
I agree
another
with
one,
a
so
lot
he's
of what
naming
Senator
two
Vance
cases
said about
that
what's
went
happening.
wrong.
His
But
running mate,
there
though,
are
does not. And
literally
that's the
hundreds
problem.
of millions
Governor, your
of
time is up.
people in this
Senator, let me
country,
ask
half
you
of
about
which
that. He
are
mentioned,
affected
it
by
was, I think,
abortion,
referring to a
right?
national ban.
So
In
what
the
he
past,
really
you
needs
have
to do is
supported
tell a
a
story
federal
that
ban
where
on
mass
abortion
people are
after 15
affected.
weeks. In fact,
If
you
he tells a
said
story
if
where he's
someone
like
can't support legislation
50,000
like
girls
that,
in the
quote,
same year
you are
got
making the
sepsis
United
and all
States the
died.
most
Well, that might
barbaric
be
pro-abortion
something.
regime
But him just
anywhere in
telling
the
these sob
entire
stories,
world.
it's useless.
My question is,
Pause it real quick.
why have you changed
Yeah,
your
I wanna
position?
speak on that point, right? So what actually needs to be response from Tim Walz here is that, hey, abortion rates are so high because of a lapsed morality decision that we made combined as a society in the 80s when we started preaching that you should do whatever you want to do. Abortion is not a result of mass rape and incest.
Right. Not all these
Abortion-
cases could possibly be that, right?
Abortion is a result of mass irresponsibility when it comes to people doing something which inevitably leads to children. If you categorize things this way, my friend, you'll find that this is a really difficult argument for people to have. I'm like, okay, on one hand, you want to live a life completely of autonomy, but you don't want the consequences that come with or the result of your autonomy. Okay, so if we say that the state gets to decide that that's not an applicable reason to murder your child because you don't want to deal with the results of having sex, but we concede, and I'm not agreeing with this, to you being able to murder the children of rape and incest, and you still look at that as if something's been stolen from you. The actual answer to the problem is, how about this? You fought hard for contraceptives, birth control. Those two are like a knockout combo. It's almost impossible to have a child when you're wrapped up and she's the pill. Why can't you lean into that? Because we also have an underpinning of people and their stupidity, right? No one wants to deal with the consequences of their actions, so they dress it up as if this is about bodily autonomy. No, it's about your poor decision making. Go home. Don't go to the club and get someone pregnant. Like, go home.
I understand the point you're trying to make, and I hope you don't feel insulted like that. But I would argue it's not even that. It's about human life.
No, it's about human life. But when you're dealing with someone's conversational points, such as, well, this minority incidents, this minute incidents, this one incidence, this singular instance, which they'll never use these qualifiers, then I reverse the argument on them. So, okay, if we're going to deal with the singular, let's deal with the masses. Abortion is a response to what? Is it a response to a mass agenda of incest and rape? Or is it in response to? And is that the appropriate response to people's poor decision making?
Now I see. Now I see what you're getting at. Okay, now I feel that.
God damn, I'm spitting gold up here.
He's cooking. He's cooking.
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022, talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position education. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's
How was it
trust
unplanned
back.
if
And
you didn't
that's
use
why
protection?
Donald Trump and I are committed to
Oh, what
pursuing
up, brother?
pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible,
He
making
says,
fertility
"Sup,
treatments
gang,
more
I'm on the
accessible,
road."
because we've got to do a better
Oh,
job at that.
nay.
And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own
Dodge
choice.
the question.
We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options,
Do you know the show Superstore?
No.
So it's a comedy where like basically everyone works at Walmart, and it's about the workers that are at Walmart. It's not really Walmart, even though the uniforms are the same. It's called Cloud Nine. It's like it's for a show. It's a sitcom. And at one point they were talking about the politicians, and somebody's like, "Who are you voting for?" And the guy says who he's voting for. He goes, "Because he's anti-terrorism and pro-freedom. And those are two things I can get behind." It's just like it's literally like standing up on a mic and saying "fuck cancer." There's no one who's not going to agree with "fuck cancer."
Right.
And so he's trying to say, he's like, this isn't about killing. I'm pro women and I'm pro freedom. Well, guess what? I would argue I'm pro women and pro freedom as well, but apparently we don't see eye to eye on this case. So it's ridiculous how I can't stand that about politicians. When they pull that shit.
I think that the pro-life argument really falls on its face in so many different ways, man. And no, but here's the thing I've learned, man. No matter how you debate the person, it always boils down to the question of agency and personal autonomy. And they're like, I should have the right to do whatever I want. And I'm like, can you just explain to me how you should have the right to do whatever you want, except for the right to make a better decision in the moment, right?
And you know what's funny is that like I think it's funny that anyone ever says that I should have the right to do what I want, because like under no circumstances do we have the right to do whatever we want.
Right.
If you're not talking about abortion in every other regard, no one would ever argue you could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You could be like, yo, my bodily autonomy says that I should bang as many underage girls as I want to, right? No one would ever go, oh, well, he's just, this is all hypotheticals. No one would say, oh, well, he's just expressing his body. or something ridiculous like that. We have limits on everything. Society makes limits on everything, and this is since we were cavemen. We've been putting limits on everything. But why is this the one thing where people are like, this should have absolutely no limits? If you dare infringe on it, you're evil. You're the devil. We should just go crazy on it. There's a horror story that I just heard. Brett Cooper. She didn't expose. I don't think she's the one person to expose it, but her last video was about this. Yo, there was a group of abortionists going around North Carolina in a boat looking for people who wanted an abortion after this hurricane.
Are you serious?
Is that correct? Instead of saving people, feeding them, housing them, getting out of this fucking swamp, the thing you're concerned about is a woman who needs an emergency abortion, if she's going to get one or not. That is insane.
Bro, I'm telling you right now, if you wouldn't have said that, I wouldn't have believed it if I saw it. And it was like there's a boat of death floating around.
This is how obsessed they are. And so, I call these people they're the worshipers of Moloch.
Right.
And he's the golden calf. He's the one who demands you sacrifice your children to him, and stuff like that. And so they must be worshiping some demonic force. If this is their concern after a hurricane destroys their area, right?
Yeah, I mean, because the one thing that has to be plentiful is not clean drinking water and food or aid.
There's a million things that should be on the priority before, the boat of death.
Right.
But I'm saying that's how crazy and fanatical people have come on this one issue. You know what I'm saying? I would even say guns. There is no person who says we need to carry guns literally everywhere, and they're armed to the teeth. They got machine guns. They have guns all over their cars, driving around. There's no one that obsessed, right, with guns. So why is it okay they're obsessed with this issue like that?
Listen, I'm an American, and all I care about, as long as my iPhone 16 Pro Max arrives on time, she can have her bodily autonomy. Because, women work in the post office, so I just want to make sure shit's working.
Did you order one?
No, not yet.
Because you said you were talking like a man who was waiting for a package.
Let's keep these bitches at work.
Beck says 6 baby mamas is wild, Eddie. I didn't realize that he had said that. Did he say that?
I did
Did
not
I miss
realize
that where he said that? Oh, he did. He says that's coming from a guy with 6 baby mamas. Who said that? Who has 6 baby mamas?
I believe the brother Eddie said it.
Oh, he's saying about himself.
Yes.
Oh,
Unless he's
I
talking
didn't
about
know
Trump.
that either.
Unless he's talking about Trump.
He might have 6 baby. I wouldn't have 6 baby mamas.
Wait, Berlin says over here, that's fucking stupid. LOL. Going around on the boat to kill kids, shaking my head. The fact that so many women are psyop to believe that this is empowering is ludicrous. Since he says LMAO, repel the 19th. LO, I'm joke, kind of. All right, hit it.
Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of
Notice he
making
didn't
someone like
explain.
Amber
He didn't
Thurman
answer. The
drive
fact
600
checkers
miles to
called
try
him and they
get
said,
healthcare.
Senator.
they said
respond to that.
you
First of
passed
all,
a bill
Governor, I agree with you. Amber
that
Thurman should
allows
still be
abortion
alive.
up
There are
to
a lot
9
of people
months.
who
And
should
he
still
said
be
that's
alive,
not what
and
I
I certainly
said.
wish that
But
she
he didn't
was.
explain.
No, he never.
And
is.
maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me. But as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives.
Oh. Nope. I think we lost the mantis. If you're still here, I'll keep talking because we're waiting for the boy to come back in. Oh, there he is.
What the hell happened? Did we lose the stream?
I think so.
They booted me right out, and I did nothing. I hit no button or anything. They were just like, "You're done."
Uh-oh.
I really made the right mistake, right choice switching to this app.
The point, that's not it
But
at all.
what was I wrong
This
about,
was-
Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong
That is
about?
not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting against, that's been
Sorry,
misread. It was
guys.
fact checked the
I
last
hope
debate. But the
I hope
point
that
on
didn't
this
kick
is there's
people
a
out.
continuation
No,
of these
no, no.
guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line
It
on
just,
this. It's my business.
It just
on
stopped
this.
the stream for
Things
a
worked
second.
best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in
She says,
Minnesota,
wait, am
they
I the
get
only one
meals.
in here?
They get
Where
early
else-
childhood
everybody else-
education.
I don't know.
They
Here's
get
what it is.
health care.
We're
So that
using a new app.
hiding
to stream
behind
these
we're going to
days,
do all
and
these other
today's the
things
first way.
when you're not
And
proposing
I don't
them in
think
your
it
budget.
notified
Kamala
people.
Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
Like it didn't
I
use my
asked a
cover
specific
for the
question, Governor. You
YouTube
gave me a
stream.
slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So
breaking
you're
down.
fact
He's
checking
breaking
President Trump.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on. And we're going to be right back.
Take a
with
drink.
more
She
of
said
the
it.
CBS News vice presidential
Yo,
debate.
I
in
would
just
have
a moment.
demanded right there that he fact check him. I would be like, Norm McDonald, you have the fact. We talked about it earlier. Please fact check him right now.
She's gonna be like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm a woman.
I'm a woman and I have bodily autonomy, and I say, fuck you.
All right, so
finally-
thus far, I think they're pretty evenly matched. I think towards the end there, he definitely held the old man over the fire there. You know what I'm saying? Vance held Waltz over the fire there for a second with the 9-month abortion and doctors not performing life-saving act, because that's a hard position to defend, right? At the end of the day, you have to just say yeah, we're into killing the 9-month-year-old, the 9-month-old outside of the womb. Like you have to just say you can't defend it. There's no
Yeah,
nicety.
you
There's
can't
no
defend it.
platitude.
Why do they allow it? I don't understand. So currently, I think there's actually 9 states that allow it right now.
Yeah, which is wild to me. Which is absolutely
even
wild.
though in the debates, Kamala Harris claimed there were no states. She's like, that's ridiculous. We'd never do that.
What are you talking about? I only order Chinese food from China. It's so weird that you would say something crazy like that. Totally irrelevant to this debate. Let's talk about his rape case.
It's just like when you talk to somebody about like people who trans children, and I love it that liberals up in New York State, because they don't understand, they don't understand what's going on. And all the time they always say, why is everyone always scared about transing children? No medical professional would do that. And then I looked it up. 14 states are currently allow it. And so you have to point this out to them. And then they'll, of course, say fake news, right? but like, because they're not living in the middle of it, they write it off as a fantasy, a conspiracy theory or whatever. I've got a lot of liberal family members who would also think that no state would allow a 9-month abortion.
I find that those are like the Sandy Hook people. You would have to literally drag them to the operating room where they're transitioning a child and setting it free at the age of 8. Yeah. You have to like literally drag them to the state where they're performing a 9-month abortion. Like people won't believe that. And I believe it's predominantly to do with something that JD Vance talked about, man. This has a lot to do with the Conservative Party leaning into misinformation groups and allowing allies such as the Daily Mail and other, fringe groups to become a part of this conversation, because you can't tell what's real news or not. So you have to be willing to stand on the pure fact, man. Stand on the pure fact of it. Speaking of pure fact,
yeah.
Have you been watching Candace Owens getting to the deep part of Kamala's?
So I find it funny that you're all into this, because like here's my issue with it. Didn't we both establish that we thought that it was pathetic how people are obsessed with it?
It is pathetic. That's why I'm bringing it up. I'm like, I was listening to Candace Owens the other day, man. I was like, I remember when she took the red pill and she was like perceived as a purveyor of truth. Just this hard hitting, let's look at the facts. Let's look at what's really happening. And now I tune into her stream and she's literally looking for birth certificates for Kamala.
Yeah, she's doing a multiple episode run on exploring Kamala history's past. And I'm like, it's turning me off to her. It's actually really turning me off. I'm having trouble time defending her.
She's got scavenger hunt money out there, like some thousands of dollars, man. And now she's got those damn twins, the Hodge twins. They're in on it too, man. It's just wow.
And it's funny for my kids, for my Sunday school kids. I was gonna recommend a couple of different channels, YouTube channels, where somebody reads the Bible to them. And thank God you put me on to the real Melanie Mack. Because I was gonna recommend her because she's a cool chick who reads the Bible. Thank God I didn't expose those children to that.
Oh yeah, no, she's a complete psycho.
Complete. It's coming back.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate.
I kind of hope that like a fist fight
to
breaks
America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay.
So.
Christ have mercy. These
guys
awful.
are so pleasant.
And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where My shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking
Those damn
about cities and
peasants
where it's at.
taking our jobs.
The number
Fucking
one
yeah, pheasants, man.
where the
You know what I
most
heard?
firearm
A
deaths happen in
pheasant ate
Minnesota are rural
somebody's cat
suicides.
the other day.
And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that. But I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns.
It's
and
not
there
the
are things that
guns.
you can do about it.
It's-
But I do think that this is one.
That is the most ridiculous fucking thing I've ever heard. The guns are killing people. The guns are getting up like zombies and fucking killing people. They're pulling their own triggers. That's just what this fucking idiot is saying. Sometimes it's the guns. It is never the gun. It is always the human. And,
Right.
and let me tell you, there's not an influx of guns now compared to the 70s. And yet these things almost never happened in the 70s. Now, people like to point out that the first big school shooting was in the 70s, and that's true. And what's funny is that was a woman. I don't know if you know about that one.
Oh, equal rights.
Yeah, yeah. And when she, after shooting up her school, she was arrested. And when they asked her why she did it, she simply said, "I hate Mondays." You know what? You know what that sounds like? That's a crazy fucking person. That bitch needs medication or institution. And you know what's funny? You know what we don't have nowadays that we used to have? We
What's
used
that?
to have asylums. And now they're
Oh.
politically incorrect to have asylums. Well, you know what? I bet if we brought back asylums, we would have less shootings. But it's not an increase of guns. Just as many people had AR-15s in the 70s as they do now.
Berlin says, "What the f? What the fuck? LOL. If I leave my gun at home, it's not going out and shoot people."
Yeah, exactly. It's not like you hear of a school shooting and you're like, wait a minute, did I lock up my gun? You go home, you're like, fuck, he got out. Like it's your dog or some shit. That it is not. It's never the gun. The fact that Tim Walz trying to pull that, it's insane. And you know what he's catering to right now?
What's it?
Women, not just women, housewives, right? These angry moms who are scared. And some mother, who's thinking emotionally and not logically, is like, you know what's horrible? All these guns in this country. Canada has just as many guns as us. There's guns everywhere, and when they talk about Finland and Sweden and stuff, those motherfuckers aren't free. They don't have freedom. So they're like, oh, they're happy, they're not shooting anyone, but they don't have guns. They don't have the fucking right to do anything really over there. So I mean, I don't, but anyway, the point is, this old asshole, his whole shit's cracking and falling apart.
And I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our
Lock the
priority.
crazies
Gentlemen,
up.
Thank you, Margaret.
Lock
Thank
them
you,
up.
Maura.
Asylums.
Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of
Kamala
housing
Harris.
and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. First, let me say this issue of housing.
No, don't
and I
let
think
them say
those of you
anything.
listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan The big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising? And what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher
property
housing prices, but we
dick.
do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens.
Here's the thing I have to say about immigration and particularly illegal immigration. And this is what I don't understand about the left. And so, like, this one was just like, you claim that illegal immigration is driving up housing. Of course it fucking is. The more demand that somebody wants something, the more you can sell it for. So if all the poor people are fighting over poor housing like apartments or cheap condos, they can raise the rent. That is population is a direct problem with the housing crisis. And so we don't need more motherfuckers in this crib. Right? We need less. Support their asses so I can afford an apartment and I can fucking move. So let me tell you, my living situation is untenable. But I find that funny. Just like a lot of people, they don't understand that, like, the more unskilled laborers there are, the more like working class jobs, the less they make.
Yeah.
Because there's more. Here's what it is: they can replace you easily with someone who's waiting outside right now to take your job.
That's true, man. That's why all the good halal.
Why liberals can't accept this or don't accept it when you confront them with this, I don't understand. But fuck these motherfuckers.
Aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American
he would have mopped the floor with her.
If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build a house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23
She should have fact-checked him right there and been like,
I have it.
Donald Trump did not say that.
Governor, we will get to you in a moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not
He's
being
like, the
used. And it
reservation?
could be
Where
a place
else
to
do you
really
think
build
we're
a lot of
going?
housing? And I think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
fucked up
of
that we're
land
laughing,
could
but
be
that is
used. We have
probably
a
what
lot
they
of
mean.
Americans that
Yeah.
need homes. We should be
Gotta get
kicking
these
out
pesky
illegal
natives
immigrants
outta
who are
here.
competing for those
Yo,
homes.
Sarah
And we should be
Palin.
building more homes for the American citizens.
Yeah,
who
Sarah
deserve
Palin
to
back
be
in the
here.
day, she was the one
Senator,
who
your
said,
time
drill,
is up.
baby, drill.
Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president
Which was
is
so hot because
letting
she's like hot.
in
Well,
You know,
of
she's
course,
hot
it's
like,
not
migrants,
true. And again,
and then
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not
That
to
way.
fact check. I'll check it.
And
That,
she's
look,
saying,
crossings
drill,
are down
baby,
compared
drill.
to when Donald Trump left office.
She had
But it's
superpowers. She
again,
could see Russia
blank,
from her
and I'm not
backyard.
trying to find the solution. I was going to ask though on this question,
Still hit it.
are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investment that gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's the
your
study?
time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like
he
for you to
apologized
clarify
for
there are
speaking
many
over.
contributing
Trump and
factors
Kamala would have
to high
never done
housing
that.
costs.
I
What
think
evidence do you
apologize for
have
that.
that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be
Right.
here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because
We're
the vice
over-regulated
president's not
in this
responsible for
country.
those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the
This
housing
bitch
crisis. I can tell.
Keep saying that.
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. It's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill, but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA.
Time!
And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said,
No, do you think?
I've got a concept of a plan.
Cook, my
No,
brothers.
I really don't have anything to cook. And this is actually a credit to the both of them, man. I've listened to this entire thing, and it may not be spicy. It may not be salacious. But this has actually been a really good debate. Like, this has been a really good, tradition.
Because they're actually talking about policy. And
Right.
if we were to watch this and immediately watch the Trump and Kamala, here's what I'm saying. Trump has policy. He's roughneck about the way he describes it, but he does have policy, he does have plans. If you hear Kamala, she does not have policy, she doesn't have facts. She's not, how he's pointing out like dates and times things happened and, different things. She never mentions any of that shit.
Well, here's the thing, man. Trump may have policies, but he lacks the ability to articulate them. And that's his biggest Achilles heel. He's
he's 10 times better than her, who doesn't even say them.
But no, here's the thing. She has the ability to articulate a point. She does not have a point to make, which is why it's
yeah, it's crazy. The other day at church, I had to give a speech, and it was like, why is it important to donate to EVBS, which is church camp? And at a certain point, I actually used the phrase. I said, we are lost because we follow blind leaders. I literally said that, which is true. Right. Our people who we consider our leaders we're looking at, they're blind fucking idiots.
Right.
Are these the heads of our political parties? These two?
Listen to me, man.
It's shameful.
Very shameful. Hit it, because I don't want to stay up late listening. I mean, these guys are great, but at the same time, they're like, this is kind of like ES.
And it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership.
Boom!
He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
So
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret.
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time.
ahead,
We have a
Laura.
number of subjects to discuss. Margaret, let's talk about families in
About a lot
America.
of things.
There is a childcare crisis
Sure.
in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House
I didn't
and
know that.
Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should
Yes,
employers
it's
be
like,
required
"Oh, my
to pay
cats,
workers
then you
while
can
they are
have
home
babies."
taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah,
I have
well,
no trouble
that's
finding a
negotiable,
sitter
and
for
that's
my
what
baby
Congress worked.
cats.
But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. They stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those
You've had
tax
4
breaks
years
to the
to
wealthiest.
overtake that.
He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things
good.
About the American family.
Right. No, she needs
the
to tear
Federal
them down.
Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the childcare shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because
really
you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz,
he answered it with his original
your
thing.
ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals.
Yeah,
Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal.
Notice that they're asking a question that isn't for both sides, that it's only valid for him to screw him.
Yeah, of course, man. Again, this is when what happens when you go into a hostile area to debate, and this is a hostile area.
And then, I have to give it to both Trump. I applaud to both Trump and JD Vance for actually accepting these debates and showing up at the enemy's turf.
Yep.
Because 100%. The cowards who wouldn't, Kamala and this old motherfucker Walz, right? They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do that.
Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square. And that's all I've said. And that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years and the last 40 years.
Let man just tell the lie.
Especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue.
You know what's funny about that whole thing?
What?
Is that you as a Christian, you would speak the truth, but the secular world around you would say you're a liar. So if they ever outlawed misinformation, like Hillary Clinton has been talking about, she's like, we need to find the way to penalize them. Maybe they could do jail time for spreading misinformation, which is fucking crazy because once again, information is subjective. Maybe people don't know it's misinformation. Who determines what's misinformation? But I promise you, you would be on the chopping block of misinformers. Because you're a Christian.
Well, here's the thing, right? They're categorizing misinformation as of yet, not saying that it can't happen. They're not categorizing religion as misinformation, right? But we would both agree that construing facts is harmful, man. You know what I'm saying? Like at a certain point, it's just hard. Like we got
basically they do not want you to spit your facts.
No, but here's the thing, though, right? All right, I'm gonna say something that's gonna bug some people out here, man.
We're here for it, brother.
In no way, shape, or form do I take my medical advice from anyone on the internet, and that includes doctors. I take medical advice from a small group of people, one of which has my last name. The other one is a doctor I see once a year. I don't take medical advice from chat forums or anything like that. I think if you're coming on the internet, for instance, and saying that you can heal colon cancer with prayer, that's a form of misinformation. Now, I'm not saying you can't pray for God to intercede on your point, but if you're saying I went to church and someone laid hands on me and I won't go back to the doctor to see if my colon cancer is in recession because of my faith, well, you've been hoodwinked, right? There's nothing biblically that supports that stance. That's the type of misinformation that I think.
Whoa, time out.
Yeah.
What if somebody were to say,
Boy,
someone, I had colon cancer,
Uh-huh.
someone laid hands on me, at a church or whatever, one of those big tents the evangelicals do sometimes,
Mhm.
and I don't have colon cancer anymore.
Like they don't have colon cancer and it's been verified, because when Jesus laid hand on the people he performed miracles on.
According to them, it's verified. You don't obviously there's no way we can force everyone to be verified which way or another, but someone's like, and I don't anymore. And so let's say you check it out and it works out.
So what do you mean by check it out?
You research this person.
Uh-huh.
They had cancer.
Yeah.
They don't seem to have it now.
Well, that's not me checking it out. Like, what did I get?
The point is that secularists would say they don't have the right to say this.
No. See, I think you're misconstruing. So if they say that to me, right? If a person
Right.
comes up to me and they say I had cancer, someone laid hands on me, I don't have cancer anymore, my response to them is, "Oh, praise God." Now, does that mean I believe them? No, it does not.
No, I know, but you're walking into my not a trap, but my whole parlor right now.
I'm not walking into a trap, because if that person then wants to go further in the conversation with me, I'm like, hey, can you tell me more about your testimony? And I'm going to start asking questions. And then they're going to say, well, I had cancer. I went to a Billy Graham revival. He put hands on me. And then I knew at that moment I didn't have cancer anymore. Then I would rebuke them strongly. I'm like, you know what? This is your testimony, and I will allow you to have your testimony. I would prefer if you did not share your testimony with my children or people I'm close to without providing some fact.
So, but the point is, so you're saying you would want them censored?
No, if they're telling me the story, I would want some fact before I believe their testimony. The Bible doesn't call for me to believe them just because they say that.
I'm not saying biblically follow, but what I am pointing out is that, like, I'm trying to test the measure, because even if they could prove it, secular forces would say they're not allowed to say it. That's misinformation. We don't believe that. No miracle will ever be backed by the secular powers. Hillary Clinton will never back a miracle.
But wait, here's the thing. There's no law on the books right now saying that that's a misinformation.
However, Hillary Clinton recently has been talking about that we should make laws against misinformation. And the question is, who makes the misinformation? Who determines that?
Well, here's the thing, right? So then they would be impeding on your religious freedoms, right? And that's something they wouldn't want to go down the rabbit hole of saying. If a person says that someone prayed for me, laid hands on me, and now my cancer is in remission, and they can prove that their cancer is in remission by going to a medical doctor, that's not misinformation. This person is claiming that
You're speaking logic right now. I'm talking about the forces against him. The demonic forces, the secular forces would say, this is a lie. We're shutting him down.
I get what you're saying, but that's not a great example, because that's different than someone saying that the Sandy Hook children are alive on an island somewhere.
The point is where do you draw the line? And there is no actual place to draw a line. It's all figurative. It's all like emotional.
No.
I draw the line here. I don't draw the line there.
I'm gonna speak to you. I'm gonna speak to you pragmatically. I think I draw the line in an instance, right? When someone says to me they think the Sandy Hook shootings were a conspiracy. I asked the follow-up question: conspiracy in what regard? Let's say after 20 minutes of sitting at Starbucks, I've allowed them to speak their point, and their point is that they believe that the children in Sandy Hook were never killed and those were paid actors. That's where I draw the line, because we all know those children are dead. They are dead. And
So my question is, would you make a law where those people are penalized for saying that?
100%. That's
Oh,
a
fuck
form.
that.
Wait. This is what I never understand this position. So this person should be allowed to trample on the memories of these people's children?
It's called the First Amendment, which means people can say whatever the fuck they want. And so if someone is misled by that, they're an idiot. They need to go. If you're not smart enough to follow the right sources, then you're a moron. If someone goes to a YouTube channel and joins a cult as a result of the crazy shit they say there, that's on you, bro.
Wait, you're
But
a
however,
Christian.
people have the right to say it.
Wait, you're a Christian, right?
Yeah.
So you would believe that you are supposed to strongly rebuke a lie, right?
Yes, I will personally strongly rebuke a lie. I will not vote a law into it, because what it is there's, once you create a law where someone's like, we can penalize liars, the question is, who determines what's a lie? And the secular forces they are malleable in what they believe is a lie. They are not good critics of what is a lie.
Would you be
And
okay
therefore, things that are the truth are eventually going to be categorized as lies.
would you be okay with a theocracy?
No, my argument is we can't make a law of it at all,
Uh-huh.
and people should personally rebuke the law, but not the law, rebuke the lie. But I'm saying there shouldn't be a law against it. You shouldn't be able to put someone in jail or fine someone for misinformation, because it's way too corruptible. It's way too easy to corrupt that.
Okay, so maybe I'm misunderstanding your stance, right? It's okay for you to say mistruths and on a public forum, on a public stage.
No, not that it's okay, but that there's no law. There shouldn't be a law against it, because that is too easily manipulated. That at one minute they're attacking people who are lying, and the next minute they're calling people who are telling the truth liars.
Okay, so where do you draw the line in the sand? Say, well, for instance, Kamala doesn't speak on policy, but when she does speak on policy, if she lies about that policy to get into office, then that's fine.
Yes, because I don't believe we should make a law. Here, it is what it is. If people are stupid enough to fall for it, then so be it. But however, we can't throw her in jail for saying one of those, how politicians lie, the politician lie, which is like, it's sort of true, it's not really true, we're not sure. Because there's always different ways to look at it.
What if she lies under oath?
Oh, that's different.
Okay. Why is that different?
So that what is that called? What's the phrase for it? That's perjury.
Oh,
so we have perjury. That when you swear on the Bible, you would then legally.
Let me ask a follow-up question, because I'm glad we agree on the perjury thing. If you say something on YouTube, is that a point that can be used in the court of law against you?
No, because like, for instance, like, these people argue I was acting. And actually, Alex Jones pulled that. Alex Jones even said, he's like, well, that's a character. That's a character. And so I would rather no laws be in effect on any of it.
So no perjury then, either.
No, perjury, yes. Because here's what I'm saying. When you make a YouTube video, you do not swear on the Holy Bible. That
wasn't my secondary question. I'll ask it again. That wasn't my secondary question. You say some straight up lies on YouTube, but let's say you find yourself in a criminal proceeding, and because you said those lies, they use that as a point of argumentation in the court of law, and they were like, "Hey, Roy, did you say these things on the 6th?" and you're like, I did say those things. You don't commit perjury, right? You're not going to commit perjury because even though they're asking you in the past tense, you own up to it. Now,
So, yeah, I did say Joe Biden was an alien. I did say he was
now
an alien wearing human flesh.
if you're up on stage and you say that, right, and they ask you, hey, did you say Joe Biden was an alien? And you say, no, I never intended for people to believe that he was an alien.
Well, I would personally say, yes, I did say it. It was all fun and games. I'm trying to get monetized.
So, okay, so you're saying the reason no one should be prosecuted is because we can't believe that people are sincere about the things they're saying.
Yes, that's precisely it.
Okay, so then there would be no reason to trust anything that anyone's saying.
Well, you need to use wisdom and discernment, right?
Okay.
And so here, my greatest example, like I keep bringing up the cult thing.
Uh-huh.
My mother joined a cult as a
Right.
result of a YouTube channel.
Okay.
She was watching a YouTube channel over and over again, and she contacted them, and she started hanging out with them, and it was like UFO cult and all this shit, and like that is nuts. That is absolutely nuts.
I'm sorry to hear
And
that.
at the end of the day, they said the world was ending. I think it was like 2017. She was totally convinced. Thank God no one let her sell her stuff. And when the time didn't come, she had no use for the cult anymore, right?
Right.
But at the it's horror. And like I'm saying, that's the extreme example of how bad it can be.
Mhm.
However, my argument was you must be an idiot to join a cult off of a YouTube video.
Right. So, as a Christian, then your official stance would be when an extreme feminist is on her platform saying that aborting a 9-month child inside the womb is not, in fact, murder, it's totally fine for her to say that.
So here's what I'm saying. It's reprehensible and disgusting, but I would not say make a law against her saying that. She has to have freedom of speech. She has to be able to say whatever she gets to speak her, and I know you hate this phrase, her truth.
It's not a real thing, but go ahead. It's not a real
She
thing.
needs to be able to speak what she believes to be true.
Right.
And she has to have the right to say that. Even though I would rebuke it, I would say all of this shit is a lie and it's fucked up. And you're going to hell, bitch. Unless you repent, you're going to hell.
So no one's culpable for the things they say.
Well, I said she's going to burn in hell. So yes, they are. They're gonna eventually, their creator is going to.
But they're not culpable in the earthly sense.
No, not really. It's not fair. It's not fair because what it is when we make everyone literalists, we destroy comedy and parody and nuance. And also, what if someone says something and they don't know the truth? What if they were lied to in the first place and they say something that they think is true and is not true? Should they be penalized? Can they be found? Like, get a fine? Can they go to jail for that? That's all absurd. That's all fucking absurd.
What if you're given
People
a
should be able
chance?
to say whatever the fuck they want?
What if you're given a chance to reverse your opinion on the subject matter? Now, remember, we're talking about varying different degrees, right?
We are
Now,
talking what you are reciting. You don't I'm not saying you mean to say this. That's like Salem witch trial shit, where they're like, "We're gonna burn you to death unless you renege your statement," and they're like, like, I didn't see Goody Proctor consorting with the devil. I lied.
Can I hip you to something, man?
Yeah, please.
The Christian faith is all about standing on the truth, no matter what the consequence is.
And I
So
believe
even
in
if-
standing on the truth. I absolutely believe in standing.
So even if there's a consequence for saying something publicly in regards to the proclaiming of Christ's name, to your original point that, Hillary Clinton, who has no political power at this point, made it illegal to be Christian, then we would find out who real Christians are, wouldn't we?
Yeah, no, absolutely, we would.
Yeah.
But remember, theocracy is not biblically accurate. There's no justification anywhere in the Bible to create a theocracy, and so we don't live in a theocracy. And so I believe people should have the right to speak. However, Christians should shoot down falsehoods and lies. We should confront them. However, I think they should have the right to say them.
Yeah, but see, that's different. The original point you're making, right? If Hillary Clinton banned the public proclamation of the gospel tomorrow, that should not change the Christian position, because it didn't change the Christian position when they were marched out in front of the line.
Absolutely shouldn't. It should not.
Oh, okay. But on the other side of the conversational point, right, I do believe that people being allowed to spout untruths can lead to horrible things, right? For instance, the advent of Islam. People allowed to tell a lie over and over again, right? Without some, doesn't have to be a legal rebuke, can lead to dangerous things. And I think the conversation around free speech becomes muddled because, for instance, when Alex Jones was going on about the Sandy Hook thing, at the end of it, he showed that he is a man of no conviction, right? And this is why I don't feel bad for those people who scream freedom of speech from the top of the mountain, but the minute they're called to task for the things that they say, they turn on it. And that's what the freedom of speech.
It's super interesting because, I was having an argument with my sister the other day about that guy who's the Proud Boy.
Yeah.
And he got sentenced to 20 years. And when he had the chance to talk to the judge, he apologized and he was like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this," and all this shit. I was like, "You have no fucking conviction, you little coward. What the fuck?" He was so sure that Trump was being cheated and he was ready to burn down the Capitol. But when they were like, "You're going to jail for 20 years. You want to plead to the judge?" He pleaded like a little bitch. And I was like, it was disgusting. And so, that's gross. That's good. But you know what's funny?
Right.
Love the Bible so much. So few people
love the Bible. Got one in the bathroom.
So few people have real conviction, and that even shows you. Like, remember Peter forsaked Jesus Christ 3 times before the cock crowed, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't believe he would. But as soon as when it was the threat of being arrested, he immediately forsook his master.
Yeah, and and then you juxtapose that comparatively to someone like John the Baptist, who, when people say speaking truth to power, John the Baptist actually spoke truth to power. Now, I get what you're saying. Let me not go too far without saying this, right? I understand the point that you're making. I just find it always an interesting talking point because the people, just remember, you'll be waiting for it. Freedom of speech, freedom of speech. I should be allowed to say whatever I say. And you should be allowed to do a lot of things. And you shouldn't be allowed to do some things. But you will be called to task for the things you say. Right? And then we have to see how much freedom of speech really meant to you. Because I think a lot of this argument, not saying from you personally, hinges on, I don't want to be held to account for anything.
I think a lot of people, like, Sneeko and them would agree. That's totally their thing, right? But there's another way I'm looking at it.
Right.
Just hear me out on this one.
I hear you. And I'm
so
here for you.
do you ever watch the original? I don't know about the Keanu Reeves remake, but do you know the original, The Day the Earth Stood Still?
Yeah.
So what he explains is he's like, in our world, we have a robotocracy and the robots are in charge. And if any time somebody does some horrible crime, the robots immediately kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, it has created peace in our world. And I thought about it and I said, well, that's not Christian. You know why? If a robot was floating around you and had the Bible programmed into it and pointed a gun at you and said, you must live biblically. And let's say you did. Let's say you pulled off 80 years of just, this robot's floating, hovering around you with a gun to your head.
Yeah.
You're not actually practicing Christianity.
Well,
you have to have the option of sin.
That's funny that you say that.
Right? You know what I'm saying? You have to have the option to actually do it. And so when people put guns to your head and they're like, you don't have freedom of speech. You have to say the textbook thing. Well, why don't we give people freedom of speech and see which path they choose?
So it's funny that you say that because you're describing the exact reason why a real Protestant or real Reformed Christian is against works-based religion, right? Now, I know we can all shift to a part in James where, faith without works is dead, but how incorrectly wrong that portion of scripture is read. So let me just break it down for you and make my old pastor.
I agree with you. I think it's just misread. I don't think he's bad or anything. I just think he's misread.
Yeah, let me break it down so my old pastor will be proud of me, right? If you are imbued with the Spirit of Christ and you are truly a devout believer, you have been enabled to have faith. And in having faith, you will do good works. But your good works don't enable your faith, nor do they impress God. But because you've had a regenerated heart, you will do good works based off of that. Let me say it again for the slow people in the back. Once your heart's been regenerated, anything you do will be to glorify God, not so your works can glorify you. That's what that's dealing with. So if you had a robot floating around your head, you know, or as the hellbound atheists who sleep in their mother's closets like to say, a sky father with a beard threatening to, you know, shoot you with a lightning bolt, that might make you behave a certain type of way. But if you have a faith that says, I have to use my discernment on what's good and just to honor God, just for the reason of honoring God, I believe people are going to make the right decision most of the time. Now, if we implant that into the conversation about free speech.
Oh, wait, real quick before you go into, it's like that an old school Christian or Catholic, don't remember his name, but as he said, love God and do as you please. For if you love God, you will do nothing to offend him.
Yeah, because everything you do will be to please him, and it won't be to escape the wrath of hell because you're in a love relationship. Man, I heard some wishy-washy Christian say something that was so dope one day. He's like, if your relationship is correct vertically, it will be correct horizontally.
Oh, right, yeah, right.
And when it comes to the conversation of free speech, I got to put you onto this show. That's right, Jesus is King. I got to put you onto this podcast called Cross Politics, which they have one of the, I won't say it's controversial, not to me, but they have a great logo for their show. Would you like to know what their logo is, Mantis?
Please.
It is an American flag bowing to the cross. Now,
oh, I love it. I love it.
Now, that would rub some people entirely wrong, man. That would rub some people entirely wrong. When we're talking about you impose that onto the conversation of free speech, man, it's true. You have free will to say whatever you want. And you have in this country the freedom to say whatever you want. But I think governed and guided by faith, you won't say anything horrible.
I agree. I 1,000,000% agree. Yeah,
that's why I stand as your next president candidate for the elections of 2028. I'm officially
I'm on this.
And
I'm gonna vote for you, brother.
First day in office, led by the spirit of Bill Burr, my first bit of action in office is 80% of you got to go. 80%.
What are you gonna do? You gonna throw them into the ocean?
80% of the world's population that isn't a vet or a child. You're already out. You're already out.
I mean, honestly, I love it. I love it. But that's the non-Christian part. I mean, let's face it. We all have, as Christians, we have these feelings where we're like, it would be awesome if I could do this. The world would be better.
No,
but that
bro,
would be unchristian.
Not 80% of youth. If you're not a youth, 80% of you got to go.
Right. But I'm saying, then suddenly you realize you're like, wait a minute, that's genocide. I can't do that. Damn it. My Lord would not want me to. Like for instance, I've actually thought about the revolution, possible revolution. Yeah. And I was like, are we going to have a second revolution? Am I going to fight in it? And I thought about it. I was like, but you know what? That's earthly glory. That's earthly glory if I participate in it. And Jesus would not want me to do it. So I can't do it, no matter how strongly I feel.
You bring up a very interesting question, man. The acts committed in war, are they murder or are they in duty of your country? I think we talked about this last week. There's a distinction for murder during wartime, and I think we all know what that is, right? Mantis doesn't agree with this, man. Someone surrenders, they surrender. That's it, Mantis. That's it. You can't. They put their gun down. They turn themselves over to your custody. They say they're not fighting anymore. You don't have to go Private Ryan and be like that little soft boy in there. You know, you break their legs and you break their fighting arms. And now they've truly surrendered.
But so what? You're gonna drag this guy throughout fucking France?
No, I'm going
For
to
the
break
rest of the
his
war?
legs and break his arms to make sure he doesn't rejoin.
No,
the
but
fight.
now how does he travel with you and your troops as you move?
Oh no, I
along?
leave him with the infirmary. I don't think you understand what I'm saying. I'm going to break his arms and his legs in a way where fighting will never be an option for him again. His only job will be to praise God because I didn't kill him.
So here's the thing, and this is very unchristian. I'm probably gonna sound like the devil when I speak about it. So you know in the you know, what is it, the Bolshevik revolution, that was the communist revolution that took over Russia. They took over the Tsar's headquarters and they killed the parents, right? And they had all the cousins and the children down in the basement, and their army argued over what to do with these children. And a lot of them were like, cut them free. And other ones were like, no, they're going to come and get us one day. We need to end their bloodline. And they, for a couple of days, and the world was watching. This is so interesting. It happened in 1917. Like, people were like on the edge of their seat. They're like, what's happening? You know, these Bolsheviks have the royal family cut up. At the end of the day, they killed them all by firing.
Oh my gosh.
But however, that's the question. Let's say you did have a revolution. Would you cut these kids free, knowing they could come one day back and get
Absolutely.
you?
Absolutely. I would cut them
Would.
free. I would cut them. I would totally cut them free without any threats of violence or acts of anything. I would totally 100% cut them free.
I bet I would cut them free, but it's such a stupid move strategically if you think about it.
I would.
Oh well, you are not finding this funny. So,
No, I'm
he's
sorry.
not laughing. I was laughing. I was like, oh, strategically, it would
No.
be better to
I
kill
was
them.
trying to put the Rumble link on the YouTube channel so Rico can come on over, but then I was like, this is a lot more work than I anticipated. So,
But like the question, I here's what I'm saying. I would argue, if you have a gun and and you're out there and you see someone who's actually doing true damage to the world and people, like maybe they're raping them, maybe they're killing people, it's the real sin is you not acting.
100%.
Like you would have to respond, right?
Right.
But like that whole thing with the Bolsheviks, for a few days, you know, they didn't know if they were going to die or not, and these guys were arguing back and forth. Let them go; they're just kids. And other people were like, "Fuck that! I'm not going to have these guys come back and get me."
Right.
Right? Right? It's like,
Listen to me. We were just literally talking about murder versus your duty in war. Yeah, there are lines, man. There are lines, and that's why you feel like you're on an island by yourself. Well, I just want to check in with the chat, man. Realm Dweller says sometimes one person's discernment doesn't match with another's spoon-fed discernment. Okay. Berlin thought I said 80% of the youth. No, I said 80% of youth got to go.
yes.
Bex called me a vote for my head ass. Yeah, vote for me. Listen, a vote for Steve might be freedom for a lot of you. 80% of you have already proven that you can't live your lives on your own. So what I'm saying is, why not consider the path of Anthony Bourdain?
Oh my god. Oh my goodness. Oh.
Berlin asks, is there a distinction in wartime talked about in the Bible? Yes, there is. And in fact, Berlin, it's an interesting journey to go, and it's a lot of it's in all of it is in the Old Testament in regards to how the Israelites were supposed to deal with certain baby burning heretics, and people just can't accept a hard truth of the Bible where it said wipe them out. I can't make excuses or apologies for the Bible. That's what it said. It said wipe them out. Now I got to ask myself a question. How bad had it gotten for God to say wipe them out? Wipe them out.
Yeah, but you're talking about like old school, like Genesis stuff, right?
Yeah. I'm talking about the Bible, the Old Testament. There's no
Yeah,
distinction, but not you. You're not doing this So I want to make sure before I go on this rant, I don't shoot it straight at my best friend. So many Christians nowadays are terrified of the Old Testament. I don't understand what you guys do during Bible study. Do you just skip everything after Genesis and you're just like, we're moving right into the New Testament?
Right,
You're
right.
terrified of it. You're absolutely terrified of it.
One thing I got to point out on this is that most of the time when people are terrified of stuff that's happening in the Old Testament, remember, it is oftentimes their histories of things people did, but it doesn't mean it's righteous. An example is Solomon. Solomon had like 1,000 concubines or something like that.
Right.
That doesn't make it righteous just because it's in the Bible. That was an unrighteous thing that no prophets had talked about yet. And so a few prophets later on, Nehemiah would be like, you have one woman, one man, enough with these hoes on the side kind of thing. And so, but here's what I'm saying, like, in terms of like war and stuff, yes, the Bible, remember, it goes from cavemanhood onward.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of like barbaric shit happening there, and a lot of it is horrible war and murder.
Okay. I love you to death. Let me just say this, and I'll carry the full weight of it. Right? I'll carry the full weight of it. And this is because something Berlin put in, and this is something that someone told me to do too, as well. Berlin, when I became a Christian early on, Berlin says I started with the Old Testament, but was told to read the New Testament, then go back to the Old Testament. The intention when other Christians tell us to do this is to try to get us saved first, and then being saved, we will have the Spirit in us, and we can handle what's in the Old Testament.
To handle it, yeah.
I would say read the Bible from front to back and allow God to help you grow in your understanding, right? I had a friend by the name of EK. He came on this podcast I was on a while ago, man, and he gave me a Bible in a year Bible, basically, right? Where it was you read the Old Testament scriptures and then you read the correlating New Testament scriptures, where those Old Testament scriptures had been referred to in the New Testament. And reading the Old Testament, I got over the boogeyman of the Old Testament and heard the story of a people that were unfaithful to God and experienced the consequences that came along with that unfaithfulness. I heard a story of a people that built a tower in the front and to in front and in face God. And this is when I knew I was saved, right? Because as I'm reading this, my heart broke for the people during the floods, but I kept being reminded that there was a reason it had happened. And when I kept turning the pages, I kept finding out reasons that there was God's wrath, right? God's wrath visited upon Sodom, right? Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right, yes.
God's wrath visited upon the Israelites, man.
Even David, even the story of David, at the end, he's not faithful to God. He's the story of a man who was faithful to God as a young man, but got corrupted along the way, and he fucks up in the end. And so, if you read the book of Kings, 1 and 2, it's a series of kings who were not great kings, and they fucked up. And so it's important that you learn that, and you watch the folly of it. It's like, it's super fucking important. Here's what I would say. I would actually agree that you start with Jesus and then you work your way into more crazy stuff. And it's mainly because of this. I learned this. And so this is when I saw people arguing online about Genesis. They're having this debate about Genesis, and they were talking about whether it's an old world or a young world, right? So young world is like the world's only 5,000 years old, stuff like that. And other people are like, no,
young Earth and old Earth. Yeah.
And they're like, Genesis is a metaphor, blah, 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 and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, the girl who won, who said it, she says, however, the only thing I need to be saved is I need to believe in Jesus, believe that he's the Son of God, and love him with all my heart. And she says, and anything else I believe is nonsense. It doesn't matter.
No, you have to be clear on that first. You have to be clear on your faith in Christ, right?
Right.
I would say, however, though, there's a fine line between being clear on your faith in Christ and in believing in Christ wrongly, right? And there's a fine line. There are attributes we assign to Christ's Messiahhood, right? There are things we assign to Christ, and it's because we do extra biblical things and we forget that there's an entire story for which Christ needed to come. And we fall into the same trappings as the people of the book because we're just like, man, Jesus feels good. He's like a cup of Kool-Aid. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, but you fall into the same trappings that those people. How do you think we got to the faith? How do you think we got to these crazy faith-based healers that have taken over?
Right. Yeah,
Africa? You know
it's
what I'm
all
saying?
over it's all over the place. These crazy people. But here's what I'm saying. I would say this. That it's like, here's what it is. When you start as a Christian, it should be about Christ, and then you start to learn about the origins, and then you're not ready for Genesis the moment you're saved. You know what I mean?
I disagree, but I understand what you say. I believe that with guidance and love of God and a proper fellowship with proper teachers, you can face the things that we would perceive to be uncomfortable. Don't run away from the Old Testament is what I'm saying, because that's how you end up in the church with, apostles and all types of madness because it's like you won't read the
I
Bible.
agree with you. There's so many people being misled, but you know what's really interesting? I love this because if you are paying attention to when I say mainstream Christianity, evangelicals who are popular, usually on YouTube or some other place, well known. If you follow, a lot of these guys are falling to sin. Like you find out they have mistresses. You find out they think they could raise the dead. They think they're the next Jesus. A whole slew of crazy shit going on. But if you go back to the Old Testament and you look at all the failed kings and stuff of the Jews, all that stuff is in them, and they're all examples of people who thought they were righteous. They're like, I'm doing great. Now let me fuck up. And then they fuck up, right? And so it is important to learn those lessons. It's absolutely important to learn those lessons.
I think one of the best shows we did, man. What's her name? Melanie Mack. What's the shorty's name with the tattoos?
Melanie Mack.
So like Melanie Mack, when she started doing Bible studies on YouTube, I was like, oh, that's good for her, man. Because I don't really take a lot of conservative commentators seriously unless they're Christian. And even then, I might, unless they're a Christian that really is reformed in their theology, like a Bible-believing Christian. And I don't want people to Bible worship. That's not what I'm after either. I just want someone who's really, really given their life to Christ to be the person I'm listening to in that regard about any social issues. I can align with conservatives, but it's the same thing. A good friend of mine, I keep telling him all the time, like, you're no closer to God as a conservative as you are as a liberal, right? You really aren't. Do you think you're going to stand in front of the king and be like, I voted for Trump. I'm a conservative. That's not how this works.
Oh my God. I hope I'm not in the room when he meets God and God is like, say your claim, and someone's like, well, I voted for Trump. Oh God. Oh my God. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be a great situation right there.
I know we got to wrap. We didn't even get through the whole thing, man, but it's crazy, man. We got up to like 18 people in here talking about Christianity, something we can't do over on YouTube. But you look at Melanie Mack, and like then we see her dropping the hard F-bomb, which was comical the way she did it, but we both agreed that like this is not entirely of the spirit. This is just her living in her flesh. Now,
and she kept doing it apparently. Like afterwards, I kept finding videos where she kept playing it. She was getting clicks for it, so she kept rolling with it.
Yeah, it's for her monetary gain. She's a truth teller, right? But then you look at a young lady like Gothics, right, who started as a social conservative commentator and then became a Christian, and her channel, I would say, has taken a drastic hit because she just went from talking about, LGBTQ issues and all that stuff in a conservative lens to talking about it from a biblical lens. And I noticed how people stopped coming around because now she's talking about Christ in a regenerated heart. Oh, they're not here for that message, Mantis. They're not here for that. They want to
Right.
hear you call people the F-bomb. But the minute you say, well, you're an idolater and a sex whore, like a sex monger, you're going to hell the same way those people are going to hell. They're all jumping ship, man. But I enjoy these conversations, man. I really do.
I really enjoyed them too, and I'm glad. I'm glad that we got a lot of you and me toward the end of this, because
Yeah.
although the debates are very important, well, let's be honest, we like these guys, but they're also super fucking boring. These two are super boring. At least Trump, we're watching, we're like, when's he gonna diss her? When's he gonna call her a fat cow? He
He's like,
never
"She puts
disappoints.
out. She puts out. I wrote it on the
Yeah, he's
bathroom
like,
wall.
I heard you puts out, and I'm like, yo, the craziest thing that makes me think it's so true, she did not rebuke him on that one.
No.
She she looked down at her papers. She was like,
That checks out.
yeah,
Paper
it's
says
just
I
like,
did
it's
put
just like
out.
not me. And I'm like, yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Check the box, left or right, if you think Kamala's easy. Burley
Yo,
wants to know-
Eddie says, what if you don't believe in heaven or hell?
Oh, well, all right. Here's the thing, right? And this is where this conversation, usually when I have it with spiritualists, either I'm wrong and there's no heaven and hell, for which I've lost nothing, right? But if they're wrong and they've denied God and that there's a heaven or a hell, they have the short end of the stick. So I leave you with that conundrum. Some people believe that hell is just you finally getting what maybe you've been living your whole life for. Have you ever heard this before? One of the most chilling things I've ever heard. Forget the fire, forget the brimstone, forget the gnashing of teeth, right? I heard a pastor sum it up in the most eloquent way. He was like, hell is when you finally get what you've been campaigning for, a life without God, a life completely separated from God. And that's what hell is. In the end, you get what you want, to be removed completely from God's sight. What you do with that is what you do with it. I don't know where else to take it. I clearly believe that there is an afterlife and that there is a heaven and a hell, that there is a reward, and the reward isn't just sandy beaches and walking miles. Like, heaven is quite literally getting to be with the creator for the rest of eternity. Did you hear anything I said?
No. I clicked on the thing, it booted me out, and I had to come back in. And
Man's has been having a time of his life with this new
here's
streaming ad.
what it is. I love that we're talking about Jesus, and that's calming me down. But before that Jesus talk, during the debate, during everything, I was sitting there in my anger, sitting there like basically sitting in a pile of gasoline, ready to start a fire. I'm angry. I'm bitter. This has reignited it.
Right.
Wait, can you tell me what the pastor said one more time?
Okay, so the pastor said that hell isn't the fire and brimstone that's been, it's not Mephisto running around with a black heart and all that stuff. Hell is the reward you've been looking for your entire life. It's you finally not having to be in the presence of God. You will be removed from the sight of God, and you finally get what you've worked your entire life for.
Yeah, that's so well said. That's so
It's pretty scary, man.
And so it's actually funny that like oftentimes, and I'm not going to say all of them, but oftentimes when people are super critical about certain verses or certain parts, I love it when I'm like watching YouTube with the pastor and the pastor educates us on it, and he's like, well, you misunderstand this thing. And so an example thing is like people don't pay attention to details. Like, for instance, my brother, he has an issue with Cain and Abel, and he's like, well, what? He's like Cain tried his best. What's the problem? And so if you watch the actual wording of it, it says that Abel faithfully gave his sacrifice,
right?
And that faithfully is not applied to Cain's sacrifice in the description of it.
Doing something faithfully isn't trying your best, and that's something people have to struggle with.
Right. And I don't understand that why God wasn't pleased with it. Is he didn't have faith in it. And so like stuff like that, I'm like, I love to learn. I'm like, oh wow. Because it's what it is that these layman's read it real quick and they're like, well, it sounds like God's a dick.
I will tell you something else that chilled me to my core when I was a new Christian, man. And I don't want to present the image of being a perfect Christian, man. I have sins I struggle with on a day-to-day basis, and thank God each one of them is being conquered on a day-to-day basis. Just recently, I was guilty of the sin of being a drunkard, and thank God I am 6 months removed from that, man. And praise God. Hopefully tomorrow will be better and I won't find a reason to drink. Here's the thing, right? One of the most chilling things I heard was from a pastor by the name of Matt Chandler, who's fallen out of grace with popular mainstream Protestant Christianity. But it was the coldest thing, man. He was talking about the book of Revelation, not Revelations, but the book of Revelation. And
Does it really matter if there's an S or not?
Yes, it does matter. That's how cults get started. Next thing you know, this guy's in the Revelation.
It's an S, bro. It's an S. Okay, go on.
That's how it starts. But it's when Christ is talking to the church of Ephesus, and he's talking about how they've lost their first love for him. And because of that, he would put their lampstand out, right? And Matt Chandler is somewhat of a biblical historian as well. And when it comes to Near Eastern things of that nature, he was like, there's no recorded history around this period when the book was written after that of that church that was being referred to. There was a church of Ephesus, but it ceased to exist. And Paul also said something very chilling to those same folks. I am innocent of the blood of you all. I've taught you but nothing but Christ crucified, right? And to have first an apostle say it to you, right? Someone who persecuted Christians, and then to be named directly, right? In end time prophecy. It's like, I remember this sent shivers up my spine, man. Also, another cool thing, Paul wrote more than 2 letters to the Church of Corinth, right? And he refers to one of the letters, I think it's in what Trump calls 2 Corinthians. We commonly refer to 2 Corinthians. He actually referred to it. He's like, I wrote you a stronger letter before the one I'm writing now. I decided to disregard that letter. Anyway, I'm just babbling now. But did you have a good time, man?
I had a great time. It was interesting watching what our VPs are about. They're both gentlemen as opposed to their leaders, their people above them. It hasn't changed my mind. Although it did change my mind on one thing. I've been relentlessly making fun of Tim Walz, and I've been like, he's a beta. he's led by women and all the shit. I still think those things, but I still have a little more respect.
I have to say that they both handled themselves really eloquently and spoke policy. And I actually enjoyed the pleasantries exchanged to them, even if the niceties were just as simple as, I agree with some of what he's saying. I think that's a good idea because it gives me hope in regards to politics in America. I sat down for dinner with someone the other day, man, and it just dawned on me this person's from another country. And I love this person. Like, absolutely love them. Have a great deal of respect for them and their intelligence. But it dawned up on me that nothing would make them happier whilst not happier, but it would not bother them to see the American government toppled, right? And while I would not be saddened by an American government that was toppled by the righteousness of Christ, I live in America, bro, and I definitely don't want my kids to experience any hardship or my friends and my family, man.
Right.
I do hope we get to a place of personal repentance in this country.
So there is this whole thing, in the churches in my area where they're putting rainbow flags out, and I'm the voice of. I'm one of the voices that say no, particularly at my church, and people are like, "Well, what's your problem?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want political imagery on my church." And like, it's not political, and they're like, "Well, what about the American flag?" And I will honestly say, I don't want the American flag on my church either.
Yes.
And they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't love this country? And it's like, you don't understand. I love this land and I love its people. But the flag doesn't represent them. It represents their government. If that flag were to topple and a new flag were to reign over us, we should still be insulated from that.
Yeah.
right? No matter who comes and takes over. Let's say the commies come and take over. I'm still going to be a Christian and I'm still going to worship.
Yeah.
And that flag is meaningless. And that's why we should get rid of all these political flags. These, you know what? I was about to say the MLB flag. Thank you. The BLM flags, but you know what? None of these whiteys in my area are waving them. They're certainly waving rainbow flags.
Oh yeah.
But and I kind of want to call them on that. I'm like, why is it okay that you do the rainbow flag, but not that? But you know what? That's neither here nor there. But
Yeah, it's a form of idolatry, and it's hard for some people to admit that it's a form of idolatry. And yeah, that's why I'll send you that Cross Politics. If you guys get a chance, man, check out Cross Politics. Just their logo alone is pretty dope, man. The American flag bowing to Christ, and it
probably looks awesome. It sounds
yeah, it looks really cool. But at any rate, folks, make sure you tune in to another episode of Mic Check this Thursday, man. If you missed Dope Dynamics on RizRadio.com this Sunday, in spite of all the beautiful things we said about Christianity, we went really deep into the Black Illuminati this past Sunday, man.
And you should pray for them, because if they disappear,
yeah, you want
it
to
could
crazy?
happen.
Whilst I was making my proclamation about Michael Jackson being a member of the Black elite, in fact, I made a strong case for Michael Jackson being the only person strong enough to not only be in the Black Illuminati, but to topple the Illuminati at whole, and they couldn't get rid of him.
He had to have been on that. Yeah, I think so.
My power went out right when I was making the crescendo of my point. Like literally, power went straight out, silenced by the power company, who clearly worked
or
for
the ghost of Michael Jackson.
Also very true. With that said,
yeah,
maybe I'm thinking about doing a rerun of Sunday's episode for anyone that missed it. So come this Thursday to Mic Check, and it will be Dope Dynamics.
There are a couple of things I want to add to the website, and one of them are replays. I want to have things where people could play old episodes and be like, "Oh, cool." Are you a fan of 30 Rock?
Yes.
So there was in 30 Rock where Tracy Jordan thinks the Black Illuminati is after him. And so he's in a room, and all the white people are trying to be like, the Black Illuminati's in your head. There's no such thing. They're not after you. And there's a TV on in the background. It's on channel NBC. And so they leave him. And as soon as they leave him, on the TV is Al Roker, and he's giving the thing. And he looks right at the camera and goes, Tracy Jordan, the Black Illuminati is real, and we're coming for you. And then he goes, ah! And then he runs.
Yo, if anyone's the avatar of evil power, it's that dear sweet old Al Roker, man. Shout out to Al Roker. I love that dude, man.
I love that dude. But if anyone's on the Black Illuminati, it's definitely him.
Oh, it's definitely Al Roker. Come Thursday night, man. Until we get that portion on the website, you can hear another episode of Dope Dynamics on Thursday, and then we'll be back again on Sunday talking about Lord knows what. And in honor of the memoriam of Spoon, I heard a certain pink princess will be doing the last episode of Bex Rated to bring the circle to completion. So we're going to go on there, and
when is that going on? This week or at the end of the month?
Wait for Bex to get me the date. Obviously, we're not going to step on your toes, because if anyone deserves the victory over Spoon, it's you.
I will make room for anyone's dreaming, as long as they're spitting on the grave of Spoon. Guys, on Riz Radio, I'm telling you right now, we're gonna have all sorts of fun changes. One of the things, I might be leaving my Sunday night spot. I'm thinking that I'm only gonna do top 40 on Friday, starting at 6 to 10. So I'll do the top 40 countdown, which should be a good time. However, I won't have enough time to do Sunday, so we're going to give that spot to someone else. There's a lot of great things are happening at Riz Radio. Check us out, RizRadio.com, or hit us up on the Live 365 app, which is always a good time. Anyway, it is time for us to bounce. We've bothered you enough. Until next time, ciao for now, bitches. Peace. Oh, wait. Peace. As Anthony Brian Logan would say.
You don't know how to end the stream, do you?
I don't. I'm trying to figure it out. Of course, they ask all these questions.